Perfect. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's session. This is the last session that we're going to be having in this series. We were talking, reminiscing this morning. So, I hope you guys enjoy it. And as always, please provide feedback afterwards. I would just like to get started by acknowledging that the land we identify as RTO9 is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat peoples. RTO9 will honor and respect the land, the people, and the treaties. We are extremely thankful for the original tour guides of these lands and all that they have shared. All those that reside, work, and play in these lands are treaty people, and we must honor the treaties in a mutually beneficial and equitable manner. With 1 in 5 Indigenous people in Canada living in Ontario, we believe working together in a mutually beneficial manner will help all Ontarians prosper through the joint development of the tourism industry. As an ally to Indigenous people and a partner of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, RTO9 will commit to improving the socioeconomic conditions of Indigenous people through tourism by creating space for Indigenous people to tell their stories on their terms. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we get going. First of all, if you didn't hear, this workshop is being recorded and it will be available for viewing after today's session on the RTO9 website, which is just rto9.ca. It will also be sent to you in a follow-up email. There is opportunity for questions. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, which can be done anonymously. Or if you want to pop them into the chat window, Reen always looks for engagement from you guys. So feel free to use those and get your ideas in there. You will receive an email following today's session, as I mentioned, with a copy of the recording, but it will also have a 2-minute survey link. If you're able to spare some time and review the workshop, that would be greatly appreciated. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off for the last time in English to Karina
Yes.
Parthene for today's session.
Thank you. Thank you, Meg. I am thrilled to be doing the session, although a little sad. It's our last one for now. So I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that I have access to the chat here. Just give me a moment. I think you can all see my screen. Like Meg said, I do enjoy having the chat nearby, especially in these Zoom presentations. It's so nice to see that there are other humans on the other side, and it makes me feel better to know that you can communicate with me there, and I can know that things are happening and resonating, or there are questions I can answer. So please, please, please engage. As we get started, if you want to share where you're from in the chat, kind of give us an idea of where you are. Always love to know that. But welcome. Today we are talking about building a long-term social media presence. The whole series that I presented on behalf of RTO9 was really to focus on the basics of social media. I think we are so consumed by the tools and the advancements in how we use these over time, but really the fundamentals are still very much important and things that we need to keep top of mind. And especially if you are in a role where social media is new to you, or you're a business owner that really hasn't, didn't realize that this would be a whole other, I mean, 10 hats, really, when we think of social media as a whole today is multiple departments, it seems. So thank you for sharing where you're all coming from too. I'm seeing all of this drop. That's great. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening with social media, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals are really what's important. And I've loved this series for that because I think it's important to make sure that the tools are just how we drive, the message, but it's all fundamentally still the same. So today we're talking about this in a way that I hope will make you feel better and just kind of make it easier for you to think about how to make great content that lasts a long time and that's sustainable in your organization and that doesn't get lost in the shuffle with all the trends and all the fun stuff happening online, all the entertainment we see, that we're not confusing creating content as a content creator with creating content for a business and an organization. There's a lot of things that we need to consider. So, we'll begin with that. I'd love to know in the chat right now if you can take a moment to share what's your biggest challenge with staying consistent on social media. So this is not new information. If you are here from an organization, you may be required to manage the social accounts, and that is not always easy or it's not always easy to stay consistent with, especially with all your responsibilities as a business owner. Customers come first, your team comes first. A lot of these things get tossed aside because it's difficult to stay consistent, not just in the repetitiveness of when you post something and you share something, but also in the consistency of your brand and sharing it that way. That is probably one of the hardest things, is to stay on top of it. And the reason for that is it's a job of its own. It really is a job of its own. And over the years, we've continued to minimize this role and assume that just because someone knows how to use a tool, or because we all consume content on these tools, that we're all able to create good content in these spaces. But that's not how it works. That's really not what it is. It does require a lot of time and energy. So staying consistent can be really hard. And I'm just going to read through the little notes here that I'm seeing drop. Trouble creating content and engaging content. Other responsibilities. It's a lot. Of course, we know that. Yep. Understanding new platforms. Yeah, there's so many new ones. How do we keep up? Creating content that, has an impact. Yes. I'm happy that we're mentioning that, because that's what we're talking a little bit about today. Yeah, I love all these comments. Quality over quantity. Yes. Participating in relevant trends while maintaining the overall brand image. Yes, also very, very important. So I think we're all aligned, and you're all here probably kind of in the same headspace, which is good, because it really is what we're going to be chatting about today. I want you to leave knowing that, there's a certain percentage of content that I want you to create in one direction and another. And I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of a breakdown today on how you can build something substantial that lasts, because those trending audios and those trending videos are fun and they can be entertaining. But if I am new to your page 6 months from now, those things are irrelevant. We've seen that content. It's been funny, it's been done. So how do we make sure that there's content in your feed that goes the distance, and not just for months, but potentially even for years? So we're gonna walk through that today. Before we jump in further, though, my name is Karen Valtena. I know Meg introduced me, but I have been a business and brand strategist for nearly 15 years, been working with business owners. So I run a marketing agency where we focus primarily on a web and strategy. We also do design to support our web efforts, but this has been the crux of our work for the last 6 years. Love this work, and it's allowed me to really work with business owners and organizations who are consuming all of this content and are seeing everything, that we should be doing online, and really bringing it to a place where I can say, okay, wait a minute, we can really streamline this and make it easier for you. And that's always my goal. I think everyone should start small. I think everyone should start with baby steps. I think everyone should do things one thing at a time. And that's why I've loved this series so much, because it is just breaking down all the noise that exists and really making sure that you're staying clear on the things that actually matter. So I'm very thrilled that you're here. Today, I am going to be filling your cup with some ideas here on how to create high impact content. So we want to make sure that, the content you're creating is impactful and people are resonating with it. I don't want you to rely on trends, so we're going to talk about that today. Yes, there's a place for it sometimes, but not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be in your feed every day. And in fact, that probably won't help your business if it is something that you're doing every day. Creating compelling content. So the kind of content that really sways someone to see your point of view and your core messaging, that's very important. And of course, staying relevant over time. I want to make sure that everything we're creating has value over time. Now, social media isn't about posting all the time. It's about posting the right stuff at the right time. So I'm sure you've heard this over and over again, but it merits being said again, because I think it's so easy to wake up one day and get to your desk and say, I haven't posted in a week. I have to do something. I have to get something out. Or maybe your boss is after you, hey, we're not staying super consistent online. What are we doing? What's the plan? And then we panic and then we throw something out. That stuff, while fills the gaps and checks a box somewhere along the way of our responsibilities, it doesn't necessarily help our long-term game. And so I really want to change your perspective on that today so that if you're in, I'd love to see in the chat, and there's no shame. If you want to just drop a yes to me, if you found yourself, waking up and getting to your desk, starting your day thinking, oh my God, I need to get something out today or this week. If you had those moments of panic, even a little emoji, and it's okay. We've all done it. I've even done it. There's just, thank you for not leaving me hanging. I was about worried that I was going to be the only one who's ever done this, but consistency is hard, and showing up at the right times is hard, and thinking ahead and planning is a lot when you have all these other responsibilities. So again, today is about kind of I want to give you a very easy way to approach this, I think, where we're going to ask you to do a bigger exercise that can be broken down into much smaller chunks. And I think it's going to help you in the long run. So when we think about the foundation of sustainable social media presence and what that looks like, it really is about creating high value content. We want to be able to create the type of content that people remember, people think about, people reflect on, people want to share, people want to engage with. So when we create high value content and we make that the core of what we're creating, we have a much better chance of sustaining the long run, but also just being more impactful in everything that we're sharing. So again, I love this chat, an emoji here. How many of you feel like you are creating high value content? Who feels like I'm already doing this? I could get better. But if for the most part you're here and you're like, I don't know if I'm doing this, I would love for you to make a note in the chat. And I'm waiting for a second. I'd love to know what you guys say. Sadly, no. That's okay. That's okay if you're not there. That's what today's about. That's what I'm going to break down for you today. So if you're not feeling like you're doing it, and someone, I don't know if I'm doing it, also okay to know. It definitely helps. Sometimes we do it. Um, so yeah, and I feel like the ones that are saying, sometimes I do this, but not always. It's probably at a time where you actually have a moment to pull yourself back and think about what you're doing. Or maybe you have a very important project happening and it is required that you share, consistently on social media. So you've carved out the time. And I feel like that's usually the thing when we pause and we take the time to actually do the things that need to get done. That's when we create high value content. And if we're doing it on the fly, it's really difficult to do that on the fly. So thank you for your honesty there. But really the foundation, like I said, high value content creation. We're going to talk about that today. And it really is important. Brand consistency and clarity. Now, this seems to go without saying, but still year after year, I am surprised to meet with new business owners and organizations who are sharing the most wild stuff online, like just crazy. And when I say consistency, just in brand identity, if you have a logo, you have colors that exist within your palette for your brand, using those and not just throwing out content with a template that you found on Canva, really making it your own. There is so much noise online. There's so much stuff in our feed. You know it. When you pick up your phone, you're scrolling. It takes a lot for us to stop and look at what we're consuming. And if someone is a fan of your work, your organization, your business, if there is this consistency in the look and what we're seeing, we'll stop because we recognize it. We know this is you. Now, when we think about brand, often it's that visual identity, but sometimes it's also the type of content that's creating. If you have a business and the content is always warm and inviting and storytelling, and it's got a certain cinematography to the video, or, we could go really deep with this. Again, we know. Think about Coca-Cola when you see those holiday commercials. That brand consistency, you get that warm, fuzzy feeling of that same type of advertisement that they've done year after year after year, but with a different message, but they really tie it all together. So that consistency of really knowing who you are and your brand voice. And we've done a session on that earlier in the series. So I encourage you to go check that out if you're looking for that consistency in your brand. But that definitely comes into play when we're creating a foundation for sustainability here in our content. Now, at the top of this, we'll have kind of sprinkled on top the audience focused engagement. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about our audience when we are sharing content. So we need to stop, and I think we've gotten better, but it still exists. The kind of content where we're just throwing stuff at our following, here are things we're doing on, here's a new product we're selling, here is a new program we're offering. And it's just all about us, but we need to make it about the audience as well. We need to bring them in, we need to engage them, we need to talk to them and ask questions and poll them. All of this stuff is super important. And this helps with the foundation of sustainability in your social presence because you become this place where people feel like they have a voice, they feel like you care. It really is about that relationship building piece that goes the distance, that really takes the cake when it comes to building relationships online. If we all walked into a room right now, we just started shouting, all of us just started shouting what we do, what we offer, nobody would really understand or hear, your message. It would all be cloudy. There would be too much going on. But if you could walk up to someone and introduce yourself and learn about them and they learn about you, there's a connection. And the next time you see them at an event or you see them online, that connection grows and that relationship grows. And that is the long game. That is super, super helpful. And we forget that second part to social media, which is we can't just post and assume everyone's taking your content. We have to post and engage with that content, engage with the people that are there, and really make sure that we're taking the time for that. And that's why when I say this is a full-time gig, it's not something that you can just easily, throw out there and hope it works. And I know that that's not necessarily the most positive spin to that. I'm making it sound like it's difficult work, but I say that because if you only have the capacity to do a little bit, or you as a team member who this has become now part of your role, or a business owner who's just like trying to make it happen with everything, don't be so hard on yourself if you can't do it all because it is a huge job. You're doing what you can. And if you're in an organization and there's all these requirements, for you to handle all of these different things, there's merit to having discussions with your team about, okay, this is a big job. Let's make sure that we, have a very clear path forward. We have a plan that's sustainable. And how do we do that? And again, I think today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips on just kind of a very easy way to dissect creating, really good content with your team and for yourself. And I hope it really resonates and helps you today. Now, there's a very long message here. And so sorry, I'm just going to read through this quickly. So we're talking about minimal engagement, difficult with success on our posts. We're going to talk about all of that today. Ongoing challenge lies in identifying the underlying factors that drive consistent engagement. Yeah, it's wild out there right now. It's really, really hard. I know people talk about the algorithms. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. But I think today might enlighten you on some of this, and it might not be what everyone wants to hear, but it is the truth with how our tools are working today. So we'll dive into that a little bit more very, very shortly. So hold tight. Okay. So now we talked about those pieces, and I'm just going to break that down a little bit further. So high value content creation would be purposeful. So every post should be useful, insightful, or entertaining. We need to make sure that there's a purpose to what we're sharing. If you're just dropping something for the sake of dropping something, the done is the time of sharing motivational quotes and saying, I posted today, it's done. No, that just doesn't take the cake anymore. We want to make sure it's quality over quantity, which I think that message is pretty clear with what we're talking about today. Ask yourself, does this post contribute to a real conversation? Will people want to engage with this? Will people want to have an opinion about this? And again, as a business owner, you might be selling, if you're a coffee shop and you're selling coffee, yes, the conversation there might be different than a larger organization that's talking about, important messages that really impact people, but it doesn't change the fact that people want to contribute to a conversation. So ask yourself if people would be willing to do that with you with the content that you're creating and when you're thinking about that high value content. And again, I will be breaking that down in a way that I think will help you today. So, the brand consistency and clarity. Can people recognize your content instantly? Again, we talked about that. Do we know? Is it clear in the tone, your values, your message? If you haven't done these exercises yet to know what your brand and how it will come across, such an important exercise, specifically for organizations who have multiple people working within them. We need to be aligned in what that tone is, especially when people come and go, or new people take on the roles, or people are on holidays, somebody else takes over. Very important to have a clear message, and tone and values in what we're creating. And for business owners, for the most part, your tone and who you are as a person and how you've showed up online will give you a lot of the answers on what your tone, your values, and your messaging is. As business owners, I know that I've operated many businesses of my own. I know my voice. I know the tone that I want to have. It comes naturally. And I think unless I'd be working in this space, I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, this is a very particular, tone or messaging that I have, but I would know that it came to me so naturally. So as a business owner, just really take some time to pause and think about, like, how do I communicate with people about my business? And you're going to start to see the tonality of everything that you do and the message and how you want to communicate it. So again, we have some sessions on that. And I think Meg has also other guests that have touched on different parts of this. So please get yourself reacquainted with all of this if you haven't already. And then, of course, the audience focused engagement. So the best content isn't just all that broadcasting it. We do want to invite participation. Make sure that we're doing that. Make sure that somebody comments on your post. Somebody actually stops in the middle of their day to write a response to a post, and it's positive and it's engaging. Please respond to them. Don't just like their comment, engage with them. Ask a further question. Create a dialogue. We get so much information from those interactions, and we're all looking for the likes and the shares and the comments. And yes, that exists, but like one person who feels connected to you, who's willing to tell family and friends and whoever will listen that they've had a positive experience, you want to nurture that. You don't want to just leave that hanging. And I think we forget how impactful that can be in the long run, especially when we're talking about sustainability online. And then kind of falls into engaging that one person deeply rather than chasing the 100 surface level likes. We don't, today, I think we have a very skewed view of what a good reach is, because years ago, we probably had much higher reaches. You might have reached thousands of people versus today, sometimes you only reach 150 or 300 people or 500 people. But when you think about that in a room, when you think about 500 people in a room, that is pretty impactful. That is a lot of people listening to your message. And if a small percentage of those people are out there resharing and re-engaging, again, super sustainable and really impactful when it comes to creating that consistency. And I think that's really, really important for you to do. I see a question here from Carol. What do you do with a negative comment? We touched really heavily, I think, on that in our last session, and it was really about not avoiding it. You can't avoid negative comments in your feed. I wouldn't tolerate when we step out of rude and we're just becoming ignorant and unkind. I think that there's a time and a place for different things, but when people are just negative and they're unhappy, we address the comment. We invite people in to send us a DM, a message where we can talk about this offline so we can resolve the problem. We never want to ignore it. When we ignore it, we tell other people that we ignore it. So if somebody is seeing that you're not engaging with a negative comment, they're seeing that you don't care enough to respond to the comments. I also think that today we can kind of all sniff these people out. When we see people writing comments on feeds that are just looking to, I don't know, dig at, the organization, the business owner, the circumstance, whatever it may be, we kind of read through this and we know when people are just trying to pick fights. But it is important that if someone lands on your page or lands on this post and they see, that someone has said this thing, that you've engaged and said, like, hey, we want to rectify this. This is not how we like to conduct business, or we want to make sure that you're heard. Please send us a message, and we want to handle that stuff. That's very, very important. So that's a good question, but please don't avoid it. Whatever you do, don't avoid it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about that evergreen content and the trend-based content. Has anyone here in the chat, can you drop a note? Have you heard of evergreen content and are you familiar with evergreen content? And is this something that's new to you? Is it something you've heard of? Nope, never heard of it. Not heard. New term, new. Okay, great. That's positive. Um, so we're going to talk about evergreen content. I think that might change a lot of things for you today. And I hope that it just kind of shifts how you create content moving forward. So what I would really love to see from anyone here, anyone really who's creating content, who is not a content creator, who is looking for trend-based traction on their pages, we want to be creating 80% of evergreen content. And that's the kind of stuff that stays relevant for months, maybe even years. So everything we've been talking about and all the stuff I'm telling you to create really is the evergreen content. And we're going to break that down in a moment. But 80% of what you create should be evergreen content. 20% can be trend based. So this is the kind of conversations that only fit at a time, like if there's something trending happening right now and it is relative to or related to your industry, or you can somehow, fit it into your message, then you can jump on that trend and make that 20% of your possible content. So if you post 5 times in a week, which I think is probably a lot for the group here today, but if you were doing 5 a week, only one of those would be trend based and the other 4 would be focused on evergreen type of content. So when we're talking about examples of evergreen content, things like this, so educational and how-to guides. So in this instance, I've taken examples of, marketing and in my space. So for me, educational how-tos, how to create social media strategies that last. So that's an educational piece and it's a how-to guide. Doesn't matter when you land on this, whether it be today, next week, a month, maybe even a year from now, although the marketing space does move fairly quickly. It is the type of content that lasts, okay? It really does go the distance. It also helps with SEO rankings, all of this kind of content that I'm talking about. When we think of evergreen, it really is helpful far beyond just the post that you've made. Case studies and success stories. I don't think we do a lot of this in business and organizations who just have managers who manage accounts because it's a lot of work. Case studies do require some work, but they really can go the distance. They can really help tell a story. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about breaking all of this down later, but case studies and success stories just prove that whatever it is that you're working on has worked, has been successful with others. And I don't think we should sleep on that. I know you can't do that, week over week, month over month, but even if a couple of times a year you took the time to create these case studies or share success stories in a bigger detail, they can be really impactful. So best practice tips, those things, we see a lot in our content. And I think as I'm sharing this, you're probably realizing like, oh, I actually do create evergreen content. I think I do. Maybe you can share in the comments if you feel that way. You might already be creating evergreen content. You didn't even realize how impactful it could be in the long run. So same thing with FAQs and common mistakes in your business. And then resource guides and the type of, the core information of your messaging. This is all the stuff that we want to see in the evergreen content, and this will really, really go the distance. So what's not evergreen? Trending topics, anything about the latest algorithm change, like all the things that are happening that you see, the latest dancing trend or the latest audio trend or trending topics in right now. There's a lot of conversations in politics and the world as a whole. These are huge trending topics, but they might not, necessarily align with your organization. They might, but this would be not evergreen. This is not going to go the distance. So we shouldn't, the time and energy that we put into creating this type of content would be very different. That kind of falls into the news related content, things that are time sensitive. And then seasonal content, holiday promotions, specific events and posts. All of these things are just not evergreen. They really just don't go the distance. They just don't last. So I'm already seeing a comment here. Exactly what I thought. I have been doing this evergreen content, which is great. And today we're going to break it down right now into ways that you can go even further and what the starting point is to creating better long game kind of content. So we're going to start with the conversation of long form content. So example, a blog. Does anyone have a blog here that they're currently sharing for their organization or their business? Love to see a hand up if you are already doing this. I'm seeing yes, yes, amazing. Yes, that's great. So long form content, of course, I think over the years we've talked about it comes and goes, but it has always been a great asset to any business or organization. Of course, it helps with SEO. Of course, it helps with sharing, longer messages, but it is also the gateway to creating more evergreen and more sustainable content in your messaging. So there are a lot of ways that we can actually build off of this. So long form content, if you don't actually have a blog, so a place to go and put these long pieces, something like LinkedIn would also allow you to publish these longer pieces. And this is a really, really great starting point. Now, if you don't have, if you're not doing this currently, I would say that you could also replace this with like a long form of, videos. If you were doing long form video content, you could change that here. There's a few different options, but I'm going to share with you how you can actually dissect this bigger piece of content into more. I'm seeing a comment. What about newsletters? Newsletters can actually come after creating this larger piece that I'm talking about. So when we start with the long form content of this blog, we can easily now transfer this into, and these are just going to be all examples that you can transfer this into. So an Instagram carousel, taking the time, this long form content, if you can create and think about a core message that you want to communicate in this blog post, and you take a lot of time, you think about it, you talk with your organization, your team members, your staff, and you think, okay, what core message do we want to have around this blog post? And we make it impactful and we take the time to really dissect it into different pieces so people really learn. This would be our starting point, and we write this, and it will take a little bit longer. Luckily, today you have lovely, tools like ChatGPT that can help you think up of new topics, help you dissect your topic, really, channeling the AI tools to be your marketing BFF, asking it questions so that it can help you dissect things a little bit further. But once you've created this really fundamental long form content, you can break it down into multiple pieces. So Instagram carousels. Instagram now allows you to have up to 20 pieces of content that you can scroll through. So you can take a really long blog post and make it into the kind of piece where you're, sliding through. People are engaging to learn the next thing. And so we're taking that piece of the blog and we're creating something for Instagram, for instance. I'm sorry, I didn't take the animation off here, scrolling through this way. We can go then to short form video. Now we can take this long form content, we can create reels, or if you're on TikTok, that's a possibility. I don't think so much here, but short form video, you can now take that blog and create a series of videos just from that one blog post, because you're not going to be able to fit everything into a 30-second clip or a 1-minute clip. But if you can focus on one piece, you might be able to come up with 4 or 6 pieces of content in your short form video. Again, we're keeping that blog post and we're creating a thread. Maybe you're doing it on X, or Threads is also like a Twitter or an X of today. An actual thread where you break down the pieces of that blog post. So you're talking about all of these different pieces in a different thread, and it's just a conversation that you're starting on these forums, again, based from that original content. When we continue, we also have the email newsletter, which was mentioned just earlier. If you have a blog content where you've taken a lot of time to really think about a solid piece of content, taking pieces of that and sharing it in your email newsletter, and I say newsletter, and maybe we should be careful with that word because it's not always a newsletter, but just your email marketing and your email campaigns as a whole, taking the time to dissect that concept. And maybe you're choosing, to dissect that into multiple pieces for an email. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. And there's a lot of ways you can dissect it, probably more than we can allow in a 1 hour or 40-minute chat. But again, these are all different places that you can take your content. And I hope that already your mind is kind of spinning where it's like, okay, well, if I had this core messaging, look how many pieces of content we can create from this one thing that we put a lot of effort into. Long form video, of course, being something like YouTube. So if you take the time to really create a wonderful piece that is sustainable, it's evergreen, it will be relevant with your key messaging in 3 months, 6 months, a year, maybe even more. When you create that, you now open up an opportunity to create content in all of these different buckets and without too much thought, other than the creative, other than the designing piece of it. It's not like, oh, what am I posting today? It's, okay, I have my core piece of content and now I'm going to break it into different things and different platforms. Now, I don't want you to go running and saying, "Oh, I'm going to create all of these things." That's not what I'm asking. You don't have to take all of, a blog post and create all of these pieces. These are all different areas based on where you are, where you live for your business. If you are on Instagram, then great. Instagram carousel and short form video makes sense. If you are more on LinkedIn, or you're on using your email marketing more and you're on Threads or X, then your content gets repurposed there. The point is, instead of working harder, we're going to work smarter. We're going to create one really great piece of content and break it into multitude of ways that really goes the distance and really takes a lot of thinking off your plate. So I see the question here. How do you define a long form content? It really is just more of a written piece or a long form video. For instance, if you were to hire a videographer to tell the story of a client or an experience with your business or your organization, that video clip might be 30 minutes long, but you're not going to share it 30 minutes long across all platforms. You'll put the 30-minute video on YouTube, but then you're going to want to break that down into little digestible chunks where you can share a little piece here on Instagram or on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you need to. So that long form is just really more detailed. For example, I'm sure you've seen a post where it's like, here are 5 tips on how to do better email marketing. And it's like, number one, get a good headline. Number two, and it's like very short. Where that long form would be, okay, how do we get a better name for our email? And then it's like substantial information on how to do that and steps to do that. We really dissect the subject a little bit further. So all the information can be found in this blog post, but then chunks of it are found everywhere else and pieces of it. And this is really, again, this is where we see your expertise. This is where we see how knowledgeable you are. This is where we see your value in the work that you're doing, your organization, your business, wherever you're coming from. All very, very important content that I think we forget needs to be at the forefront because the way we consume content, hands up, if when you get caught on Threads or TikTok or wherever, or not Threads, sorry, Reels or TikTok, you're scrolling the funny stuff. You're scrolling the entertaining things, the stuff that content creators are creating, and you're like, haha, and you're giving more to the algorithm to that. So you get more and more of that. And then you have to go create. And then you think of all these fun things you see and you think, oh, I have to do that. There's a place for some of that, but also there are a lot of people out there consuming the content that you could be creating that really educates and entertains in your own way. And we can't lose sight of that. So this whole thing is very, very important. And I hope that it's already, shedding some light on for all of you on how to simplify the process of, going to find ideas and making the type of content that lasts. So how do we do all that? Step one, we are going to identify our core message. So, what is the one message you want to share that aligns with your brand and your business, your organization? And when we think of this core message, it could be, if you create one solid piece, one solid post every couple of months, every 3 months, every quarter, there's one substantial piece. And then you use that to create all your further content within the months that are tied to that. That one core message could be for the quarter. What do we really want to focus on right now? How do we dissect that? If you're doing more frequent content and you're required to do more frequent content, you might want to look at doing this month over month, but that's a choice that you need to make with your team or with your strategist or the people that you work with to make this happen. So identify your core message, and then we're going to leap into creating that long form piece of content. So we're going to go to LinkedIn or our blog, and we are going to create this long piece of information. And it's going to be helpful for our SEO. It's going to be helpful to create a long-lasting message that we will then recreate, but also making it engaging. We want to make sure that there are proper hooks. How are we grabbing attention? In the first paragraph, the first sentences that come up on the blogs. How are we inviting people to engage with us? What are the CTAs that we want to make happen? All of this is still very important in how you deliver the content. So yes, you want high impactful pieces, but don't forget to, attract attention and make sure that people take action where you want them to. And then that, of course, the last step is what we've been talking about, which is breaking it down, repurposing it, again, like I said earlier, it can look different everywhere. You can turn a blog post into 3 Instagram posts and a LinkedIn thread. That could be it. Or it could be taking your video and creating a reel, a carousel, and a podcast topic, or an email snippet about it. Whatever makes sense for you, figure out your plan on how the pieces you want to use, what aligns with your vision, the tools that you use, the capacity that you have. If you don't have time to create long form video or the budget to hire someone to help you do it, or the tools or the knowledge, then maybe writing is your thing. You don't love writing and you're not sure how to. Again, lean on these new tools, these AI tools that help. I'm not saying just go and drop into ChatGPT, write a blog post and go post that. No, you need to, there are practices to help do that, but there's a lot of tools now that make it a lot easier for us to do all of this. But at the end of the day, it just requires time, requires a little energy, a little pause from you to think about what makes sense. Because if you're not thinking about the content that you're sharing, if you're just like, man, you're not thinking about it, the people who are consuming are not going to think about it. If you're not giving it time and energy, why would anyone else give it time and energy? You really need to make it a priority. And I'm sorry, someone asked, what is a CTA? So that's the call to action. What do you want people to do? Follow the link in my bio to go and register, or get on my email list, whatever you want, the action you want people to take at the end of the content that they've consumed from you. So again, making sure that you are creating things that you're excited about, you care about, because if you don't care, other people won't care. Now, this one you're not going to enjoy hearing, but it is the reality. If your content isn't reaching people, it's probably not interesting enough. It's probably not giving people a reason to stop and listen. And here I just want to send a message of share your unique voice. Do not be afraid to lean into your messaging. Create things outside the box that are not like everyone else. Creating content that doesn't look like everybody else. If you're taking photos, make them unique. They don't have to be like everybody. Step outside of the norm so that you will step outside of the norm when people are scrolling. And we hear a lot of conversations about the algorithms. Oh, the algorithms today, they're just terrible. No, it's not the algorithms. The number of the pieces of content that are being produced today is at an all-time high. So it's not the algorithm. It's just that our content is just not good enough. It's just not showing up where we want it to show up because we're not taking the time to think about it. And this isn't a dig. This isn't to make you feel bad about what you're creating. It's also, it's more to put into perspective. Again, if we're not taking the time to do something unique and different, people are going to engage with the people who are creating things that are unique and different. And that takes time and that takes energy. And we just need to understand what our goals are with social media, right? We need to understand when we talk about reaching people, if you are at a very local level, then you can probably get away with, lower reaches, and you don't need to be going viral. You don't need to be creating the type of content that just, blows everything out of the water. Maybe you can get away with the status quo, but if you're trying to break through in an industry, or you're trying to get new people to see what you have to say, you need to jump outside of that box that's been created and create something different. I follow all of the especially I think Instagram is always top of mind. Like, how do we break through in that? And I follow the CEO of Instagram online, and it's a constant conversation, constantly reminding us it's not an algorithm problem. It's a content problem. We need to be creating things that people want to consume, because there's no shortage of people consuming content. On average, people are consuming almost 59 hours a week of media content. by their devices, their televisions, wherever else. People are watching, people are listening, people are ready to engage. We just have to give them something to look at. Sorry, someone said I missed number three. I'm just going to throw it here so that you can screenshot this and take that. Um, but I hope that this message resonates with you. And I don't want, it's not meant to discourage you. It's meant for me to really get you to think about what can I do differently and how can I work harder, again, work smarter and not harder? How can I stand out by creating content that really can be more relevant and that will help me stand out and get more people interested in what I have to offer? Last little tidbits that can be helpful, creating content that feels personal. People remember how you make them feel, not just what you post. So we really do want to pull at those heartstrings. Talked about Coca-Cola earlier. Every Christmas, they do a really good job with those commercials. We want to tell stories, not just sell to people, not just buy my product. Tell me why it exists. Tell me why you're helping me. Make that part of your core messaging. Break that apart into digestible chunks and encourage real conversations. Ask questions that matter to your audience. When you ask them questions that matter, they're going to feel like they matter and they are going to want to engage back with you. And if we practice these things and we take the time to think about what we're actually putting out into the universe, not to sound wooey, but if we put those things out in a way that's much more productive, we will get that return. And it's a long game. This type of content is a long game. Having a presence that people resonate with and love and get excited about, it's a long game, but it can be worth it. And it starts with just taking a few steps. So that's it for me. Meg, somewhere around here. I know she'll be back.
I'm here.
There you are.
So this is your chance to pop some questions in the chat. I actually have a question for you.
Oh dear.
I- A lot of the people who may be watching this today are perhaps small businesses. Is there a type of content that they should avoid doing? I know when it comes to small business, sometimes it's a smaller community. Sometimes they want to post maybe something that's a little bit less on the business side, more personal or jokes or memes. Is there any type of content that they should avoid posting? Or can those things be turned into content that can help generate engagement?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line with the personal conversation. I think the internet went a little crazy with like, if I share my vulnerability, then everyone knows I'm human and everyone will want to do business with me. I also think it can have a negative effect. I have always shared a personal side of like my personality. Like you can see my personality and who I am. I like to drink my coffee. I like my music. There's certain things, there's certain elements that you are going to know about me when you discover me in person in real life. But if I show up every day and I'm saying things like, oh, it's just another rough day, like right now, the tariffs, for example, big, heavy conversation. I'm seeing a lot of business owners coming in with this just heaviness of like, oh, it's going to destroy me and it becomes a lot. You're just contributing to this like fear and this energy that's just so draining. And that doesn't stand out anymore. Like that doesn't help, I don't think, from a business perspective. I think it's very different if you're sharing from a personal space, maybe a personal blog, but when we're trying to create relationships to build our businesses, and if all of our content is, woe is me, this is a tough day, like that side of personal sharing, I think is not ideal. I don't think that that serves people. And to be honest, I've seen it with clients over the years where we've had to work really hard at like changing the mindset of what authentic looks like online. Authentic doesn't mean just spilling your guts and, sharing every intimate detail of your life. So I think we have to trend lightly there and trek lightly. And I think that overall, business owners, there's so much content that if you have to think about it too much, if you're like, oh, does this have a place or it doesn't have a place? Like there's probably something else you can be sharing. If you're on the line, it might not be worth it. But check in with people that you trust. Have somebody that you can trust and have a conversation about this to make that better. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
That does a good, that, yeah,
There were a few
that was
pieces.
a good answer. We do have a question here from Maggie.
Yeah.
She says, does photo content have any value on Instagram anymore, or is it all about video?
Absolutely. Instagram still wants to see a variation of content. I will say that I think photos go the distance a little bit further when you do it in a carousel. It doesn't have to be 20 photos. It could be just 2 or 3 photos to swipe through. So if it's an event you're hosting, instead of just like, oh, here's a photo of that event, a few photos, that's super helpful. Even meshing a little video clip inside of that. So no, I still think there's value, and to be honest, the tool wants you to use all forms of media. It really does want you to do a little bit of all of it. So I wouldn't stay away from it completely. Although the video content we do know now does go a little bit further as far as a reach when we're thinking outside of our followers for sure.
Perfect. And then we have another question here from Susan. What about hashtags and tagging? How helpful is that with getting more followers and engagement? And then there is, of course, SEO.
Yeah, the hashtags is like an ongoing conversation. There's a place for it. If there's a good strategy in place, it can be helpful. I'm looking at the question here, how helpful it is with getting more followers and engagement. Uh, what a hashtag should do is should put you into like a world of content that exists there. So is it going to get you more followers? Maybe if the content is substantial, like if we're going to throw you in that bucket of content, say we're doing social media marketing hashtag, and you're in that content, social media marketing has tons of content already that exists. So is my content relevant and interesting enough to stand out there? That would be the question. And I think the conversation we had today, which is making sure that we're creating the type of content that stands out and has a greater impact to get that. So directly, more hashtags getting you more followers and engagement. If you're creating good content, yes. If not, then there's just a nice little highlight at the end of your post.
Perfect. And then we have one here from Morgan.
Yeah.
We often will write long posts on Facebook and then share smaller ones on Instagram. Should we be doing something different on each app, or does sharing the same content count as creating content for each?
So every platform should have its own um, content distribution. So don't, sharing from one platform to the other in the auto share, more and more it is kind of frowned upon. You're not going to get, I think, the same impact. Your audiences are likely different. Like the people who exist on Instagram are just different than the people who exist on Facebook. So I think there needs to be a little bit of a different approach when we are creating the content, but the core messaging of them, can still be different. You could still, you have your long form. Well, maybe today on Instagram you're sharing a reel on that information, and on Facebook it's a carousel type post or a few images or some type of flip through. The core messaging can be the same, but the delivery of the content might be a little bit different. So don't be afraid to really look at your audiences in the different spaces and really look at your insights. And I know we've done sessions on that, but I know that I'm sure there's other sessions that RTO9 has recorded about that. There's so much to be said for the data that we collect on what should go where. I guess that my core answer here would be that you really should look at each platform individually, and each of those become their own piece of content that you create.
Perfect. And then the last one here, we have an anonymous question that's asking how to expand your audience if it's plateaued.
Yeah, I mean that happens a lot, especially now, and I think it just comes right back down to our discussion today. Why isn't it reaching more people? And I think the easy answer we want to hear is, oh, well, the tools are working against us. The tools are just not there to help us. It just doesn't work. And I don't think that's the reality. I think it really is the content that we're creating. It would be I would need more information to know like who and why the plateau arrives. But I think most of the time it happens when we are not showing up like in our businesses or organizations. We're not people-y enough, if that makes sense. There was a time where social tools, we needed to show up in a very polished and professional way. But because of things like Reels and TikTok, and this content creator world that we live in, we're seeing more humans and more people. So if you're not showing up in your feed as your business or your organization or people, part of your team are not in that feed, I think it'll be very difficult. I think it's going to get harder and harder for organizations to stand out if they're not using humans in the content that they're creating, because it just doesn't feel real and it just doesn't feel interesting, because there's so much other stuff right now. We love to hear from people. There's a reason why reality TV does so well. You don't have to like it, but the world engages with it because it's interesting. We're fascinated by people's minds or the crazy wild things people say. We can't believe it. So again, we very much engage with humans and seeing how other people interact. So if you're not doing that stuff, I think that would be my first thing to look at. How are you engaging with the audience from a human level, and how are you showing up?
Perfect. And one last question before we go for today. It's any tips on minimum and maximum numbers of hashtags to use?
I think people get too caught up with that stuff. Like it's not, I would first and foremost focus on the type of content you're creating before hashtags. I just don't think that they have enough of an impact unless you are creating really great content. And then once you get there, it's just using relevant hashtags. There's no key number, there's no specific, it's what conversation you're actually taking a part in, and whatever hashtag you belong in the space you're in. Don't go driving yourself crazy, making sure you hit 6 or 8. It doesn't matter. Use the hashtags that contribute to the conversation you're having. But also make sure that whatever you're creating is at the forefront before anything else.
Perfect. And then Robert's put in a great note there if anyone wants to go in. He says, recommends checking out the social media page for the Museum of English Rural Life, and the language they use to engage the audience can be hilarious. So if you're looking for something to go and have as an example to see the engagement, Robert's put in a good source for you to go and have a look at.
And
So
that's a great point. If there's someone doing, sorry,
yeah,
if
go for
someone's
it.
doing something and you're seeing they're getting engagement, you can learn from these pages. Now, take what makes sense for you. It might not all be applicable for you, but if you see someone is doing a substantial amount of content and it's going well and they get engagement, you're like, how are they doing this? Really dissect what it is that they are creating. But also be mindful that, like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's like, I was talking about this with someone the other day. They're talking about a very famous actress and how she shows up and makes motherhood look so easy. And then she shared in one of her posts, she has like 7 nannies or something ridiculous. And the overall comment was like how we see people doing things and we forget that they have help and they have people supporting them. So if you do see someone doing really good content and they're showing up consistently and everything makes sense, ask yourself also, uh, is this one person doing this? Do they have a team to do this? Like, be realistic so that you don't just count yourself out before you even get started, because you can't possibly begin arriving at that level. Like, take one little piece of what they're doing well and start implementing over time.
Perfect. That is a perfect way to end it. So thank you. That was a great session. Lots of engagement. Really appreciate everyone coming out. A reminder that you're going to be getting a follow-up email with the recording and a quick survey if you want to give us a little bit of feedback. It's all appreciated. And thank you so much, Kareen, for this
Thank you.
wonderful series. I hope everyone's been taking the building blocks, and you can go back and rewatch things if you've forgotten some of the content. It's all available on the RTO9 website. Kareen's done an awesome job getting us back up from square one, building our audiences, building our social media. It's been an awesome series. And, give us some feedback, and maybe we'll have a new series for Kareen to do in the upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the feedback and thanks, Maggie. It's been a lot of fun, and at the end of it, I just want everyone to have fun with it. Everything is so serious in the world, and this is an opportunity to have fun and get creative, and let's not lose sight of that, because there's a lot of opportunity to make learning and entertainment fun while also being educational and helpful to our businesses and organizations.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining.
Thank
Uh,
you.
the email will be following up, and enjoy the rest of your days.